back aboard here, Hanuna, and continuing on with our project. So I'm going to try and go through what it is our end goal is, and share a few of the little stages we're dealing with. We're here in the Haggerty's Boatyard in West Cork, Skibbereen, just outside of Skibbereen, in a place called Old Court. Really old wooden boatyard, and tied up here alongside a pretty scrappy looking old trawler. At the moment, I've got in our pod here, this is where our cockpit is. I've removed the wheel, which was here, and this whole cockpit is going to be removed. The whole mast step is being removed, along with this one, which I showed some of the work I was doing on last episode. So what's happening here is I've got in the benches here in the stowage is I've got 3 lithium batteries, so they're 200 amp hour, 12 volt, 200 amp hour, and that's all going to get moved. Everything is centrally located here. This is the setup when I got the boat, with all the wires done in a very funky way off to the 2 hulls, going to the main galley and cabin here, and to the workshop and chart room and cabins over on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all of this from this location over to the chart room area where the workshop is, as a temporary situation until we get things set up on the new pod that we're going to build here, in order to be able to remove this pod. So that's what I'm continuing on with today. At the end of last visit, I pulled apart the steering in here and tried to remove as much as I could, so that we're going to use a crane to lift this off. Although, as I look at it, I have a feeling we can pull a lot of it apart by hand. The top is separate from the bottom pieces, so I should be able to remove the top cover, and then these 2 pieces we might be able to lift out, but probably we'll use a crane to get those on out. Inside here, I've got the lithium batteries, and on this side, I've got the Multi-Plus. Now, I don't know if you can see here, but that reflection is water. So the previous owner put in these handles, and they're not waterproof at all. So water's coming straight in through the end of them. So it's pretty bad design. The water catches right there and goes through where it rotates, just through that little crack. So that's been a problem since I've had these. And the original builder made these completely watertight. So the second owner, he decided to make them not watertight. So that's a bit of a problem, and there's water in there, which doesn't get to any of my electronics, but it's a lot closer than I like. So anyway, all this is going to get moved to a much safer spot really soon. So I've managed to move the batteries to the workshop and the chart room. I'm going to give you a little tour around this space. It's very much a mess. I've not been aboard for a while, so remembering where things are has been tricky. Always a bit tough when you're not at it full time. You're coming back, and if things don't have a place, which they don't yet, because a lot of the gear got moved over from my trawler that's located in another part of the boatyard at the minute. So a lot of stuff needs to find a place. I love a good workshop. Who doesn't? Who does any work on their boats? So that's what this is, and it's a bit of a mess right now. But anyway, a tour around just for the purpose of, I'm trying to determine where the best place is to put these batteries. Now this is going to be a temporary situation. The batteries aren't going to live here forever. They're going to live in the large pod that I'm building, which will house a double bunk, a nice big queen berth, and a large table to sit around that can hold a nice group of people, 10 people sort of thing, sitting comfortably enjoying our time on anchor somewhere. And then also the cockpit where the steering and most of the navigation will really happen. Down here the batteries are going to sit until I have that built, and this will allow us to use the electrics aboard while we're here, sometimes living aboard. I have a little cottage not that far from here, so we're staying there most of the time right now, but we will be staying aboard as much as possible when things start to get really serious with building the pod. So it's a little wet and a bit damp, as you might have seen in the video there, a bit gray, Irish gray. That's okay. And yeah, my video sense is going crazy right now because I've got bright light behind me. Not very good video sense. So gonna work on that, see if we can improve things. Anyway, here we are, and I'm gonna tour you around. So as you come down, you are in the workshop, which is a mess, as I explained, lots of tools, and the chart table, which doesn't work wonderfully. We don't use it a huge amount these days, but it's something that I want to improve on. There are a certain amount of controls, or a certain amount of gear giving us the wind, and we've got our main VHF and such. It's all down. It normally hangs up here, and then one of our switchboards, which controls everything in this hull. You've got the cabin down in here, which is looking very full and messy right now, but that's a nice double bunk. And then there is the sort of a sitting area here we don't have any tables set up for this space, but it's sort of a chill area. I guess that bench on the port side there on the left could be a berth for a single person, and another double. These aren't massively wide doubles, but they are comfortable doubles, with a little stowage just aft of that bunk there. So here are my batteries. I've got 3 transporter batteries in the US. Those are the same as Dragonfly, I believe. In fact, I saw somewhere on here, might have seen somewhere that it mentioned Dragonfly, but anyway, I believe that's the same company. I bought 3 of these some years ago. They were in the trawler. One came over here, and now I've brought 3 over here. I have 4 in total because that's a 24 volt system over there. And I've got my multi plus Victron. That's a 1200. It's all upside down there, but it's 12 volt, 1200, 50 amp. So that's for topping up the batteries or shore power. So right now the question is where are these batteries going to sit? And I think probably the most obvious thing, although not maybe the safest, is going to be under that bench. And I say not the safest because there's not a massive amount of room looking straight down on that bench under there, and I don't want anybody to kick them, obviously. The other possibility is literally just setting them up on the bench there and going for a properly temporary situation. Because there's going to be a lot of movement around here, I'm not sure that that's the ideal situation. So I just wanted to take a minute here and talk a little bit about my experience using these lithium batteries. I know it's something everybody's thinking about in terms of how can we use less fuel perhaps. I'm not convinced that these are the most blue option or most green option. What's the term now? I don't know. But anyway, what goes into making these is not the best for our environment. Having said that, it's also a very, very different sort of situation in terms of energy usage. Now, I'm not an electrical engineer by any means. I'm not very good at understanding a lot of the great details of it. But just as a practical use, which I think is really what it comes down for all of us. I mean, I'm pretty decent at figuring things out, but I've found these a little tricky. And although, the idea is that they give you more bang for your buck over time. These should last me quite a few years. I've told anything from 10 to 20 years. And they can be brought down to zero. That's where the glitch is. So if you don't know this, it's a real learning curve. So in my experience, I had multiple situations where I came back to the boat and there was no power. And I'm not talking about low power, I'm talking none. And the reason for that is because in order to protect themselves, all of these guys have a little battery management system, a BMS, as that's referred to. And inside that, it automatically shuts everything off entirely. So you get no reading off of anything if you get down to a certain voltage. Now, I don't know what that voltage is in these. It might be 4 volts or 5 volts or something like that. So you're not even getting a trickle. You're getting nothing. So that's very different than a lead acid battery. So you'll see here I've got, I don't know if you can see it on the ground here, I've got a lead acid battery. I keep a lead acid battery now on board at all times, because if that happens and this thing goes off, the only way to start it, again, is to zap it like a, what do you call those things that you use to wake somebody up or to get their heart pumping again, a defibrillator. You have to basically hook up 12 volts to this in the proper polarity, positive to positive, negative to negative. And what happens is you get a little spark, and you can hear, well, when it's hooked to this, you hear a click on this. So it's recognizing something has shown up. So if you don't have a 12 volt battery on board or you don't have shore power, you're basically screwed. So if you're out on a mooring and you've got no other form of juice, another good possibility would be one of those little jump starter packs, those little tiny ones. I have had those on board before, but I haven't liked those as much. Just having a reliable lead battery that's just on a trickle charge and able to have juice in it. It doesn't even have to have much, just to wake these things up, because it'll happen. I guarantee you, it happens to me a lot more than I'd like, and it's just a real irritant. So you're in a situation where I've had my trawler in the marina, and the power's died, and the bilge pumps are running because that's a big old wooden boat, and a little bit of water trickles in all the time, and it's pumping out with the pumps, and so I've got a little bit of juice going in, and all of a sudden I come back and the batteries are off, gone, and so after having that happen a number of times, I've been carrying that 12 volt battery around. So a lot of people, I think, on a practical level, if you're not a wizard with these things, which you shouldn't have to be if somebody else is setting this up for you, but you might not know that. So I highly recommend keep a 12 volt battery on board if you're going to use it lithium for anything, because they will shut themselves down. And it's good they do that, because at the end of the day, they're keeping them from blowing up or from being totally destroyed. And I don't understand why that all works, but that's just basically the way that they run. Other than that, I really like the idea of the lithium batteries. I like the idea that even though I know they've taken more in their industrial process to get me where they are, they're going to last me a lot longer. They cost a lot of money. I think when I bought these, I want to say they were about 800 sterling each. They've come down a lot in price. I don't know about this company, but I know that I've looked on AliExpress, for instance, and you can get what looks like pretty much the same thing for 400 to 500, something like that. So that's a pretty good drop, especially with today's inflation. So I do like the idea of them. I do have another massive battery bank, which I'll be bringing on board, which is part of the e-propulsion system. It's their large, I think it's 176 kilowatt beast that weighs 90 kgs, and I use it in a punt, a large working, not a large, but a heavy working wood boat that I have where my cottage is on the island as our main transport. But that thing is so heavy, you don't want to have to move it around. And I didn't know that when I got it. I didn't realize that it was so beastie. That, again, hard learning curve there. And this is all cutting edge stuff, you know. The reality is that where we stand, just like with electric vehicles right now, you know, we don't really have the power supply to these things. So I'll be setting up a lot of solar. I'll be setting up some wind. I'll be setting up an aqua propulsion. Basically, I'm thinking of working just with an alternator on a shaft with a prop at the end of it, see what kind of juice we can get off that. A high output alternator, low rev, high output alternator to recharge. So aqua generation, basically. So when you're underway sailing. But, you know, we use a lot of electricity. Even if I'm just running lights and regular gear and not doing anything. I don't have a cooker. You know, I've got a small fridge, very small little fridge, 12-volt fridge. But you can burn through it pretty quick. So energy in general, if you're not in a marina, and I don't particularly want to be in a marina, is definitely something that needs a little bit of thought. And also, you know, as is always good in our world of consumption these days, reduction of use. So figuring out what that means. So, but I want to be able to keep my phone charged. I want to be able to keep my iPad charged. I use that for navigation. So you don't need a huge amount for that, but still it can wear down. And we're not in a really, really sunny area here in Ireland. You can get a lot of sun and a lot of days of it, but you can equally get not so much. So that's where wind turbines come in handy. So when we get her down to the Med or down to the warmer areas, it might be different. But so anyway, those are some things to think about. So I'm continuing to look for a place for the battery to go. I thought about maybe putting it under this bunk, but it's pretty full in there. I could reorganize that, but just at the minute, I think I'm not going to try that. So I've had a thought of looking underneath the bilges here to see what sort of space, because that's a space that rarely gets used for me. All of these, you know, this is a deep boat, this Tehini. It's amazing how much space there is on this thing. So all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, wait a minute, what's under here? So look at that. There's a lot of space in there. So I'm gonna see if the batteries will fit. If they will, we've got a long, high, sort of rigid piece here that gives support all the way through the boat. Sort of a backbone, it looks like. But there's quite a bit of space between here and the floor. So I'm just gonna see if there's enough there to maybe set a piece of plywood here that would then support the batteries nice and low, and possibly ideal. So that's pretty cool. I'm pretty pleased with that. There's actually enough room in here for, oh, I don't know, maybe six of those. So that's 600 amp hours right there. I don't know that I'm going to need a massive amount more than that when I get my e-propulsion unit on board, but that's pretty cool. And actually, just for the moment, that's perfect, because we're not planning on doing any voyages or anything with the vessel. so they're not going to get knocked around in there. They're pretty snug actually, and it wouldn't take much to make them really snug. But what I love about this solution is that it didn't take any extra effort right now, because long term that's not where they're going to live. So we've got a Panda generator that's coming out of the trawler to support the electric systems. I'm going to tie this on to the after a couple of days of working at this, I have managed to connect up my electrics, and that's my BMV 712 by Victron battery control, or battery monitor rather. And you can see also that my Servo GX is blinking. That's a good sign. I'll show a little more about the BMV 712, but everything's more or less in place for me to be able to keep electric supplied to basic use within the boat. So here we are in the chart room workshop, and I've got my batteries connected up here in series. So I've got, I had said earlier that these are 200 amp hour, they're actually 100 amp hour. So I've got 300 amp hours, 12 volt. I've got my Multi-Plus compact in place here. As you can see, the charger is running and cables going down, hooking up. Got the positive here, got the negative going to the shunt. This is the shunt here, which reads the amperage usage and different details about the battery power and so on and so forth. Gives me some feedback via this little guy here, which is the BMV battery monitor, showing that I've got 13.19 volts at the minute. So that's a little low. That's quite low actually for these. So I'm waiting for that to come up. As you can hear, the charger is running at full blow. And then on my Servo GX here, I've got all the details. This is a link up where I'll have my solar panels usually would be connected into this. And also it gives me the ability to monitor things remotely. So in theory, I could have different things hooked up here that would give me information about the bilges, about tanks, whatever I like. I usually keep hooked up here to that directly, this one USB cable that keeps plugged in. It does have a couple of USB ports in here. So I use that one primarily. Is that it there? Where's my USB? Yeah, I think that's it. No, it's not. Sorry, it's right here. There we go. We've got 3 USB ports there. And this is hooked up to a camera. So this camera I use primarily when I'm on a mooring, and I can just keep an eye on things. So if I know a big storm is coming, which often happens down here in West Cork, I can monitor what's happening through my port light there. I often have one out the aft as well. So that just keeps a trickle charge to keep that running.